Come on in and take a load off and listen to tales from the dusty west to adventures on the cold seas. This is the place to listen to all manner of characters, spin yarns of stories, exploits, and just ramble on. Welcome to the table at Blackhoof Saloon-Ramblin.
Howdy, and welcome back to the Blackhoof Saloon. This is Eric here, and I am joined by my co-host Brian. Plus, we have a special guest. We wrangled Stuart from Warcradle Studios to chat tonight about some of the cool things that they announced this past weekend at AdeptiCon 2019. So, we just finished up AdeptiCon, and Warcradle announced some new stuff this weekend. We have news of a familiar Exodus world, a new world, the Lost World Exodus in the dystopian age. Welcome, Stuart. Can you start by telling us a little bit about where Lost World Exodus came from or started? Kind of like how did it come out of Wild West Exodus?
It was one of when we first established Wild West Exodus, when we kind of took on the license. At the moment that we knew there was a good chance of us obtaining the license and the property for Dystopian Wars, I began to sort of sketch out in kind of very loose terms what that would mean. And I kind of figured there would need to be four other games that would exist in the dystopian age, this dystopian age that we would create. This would be beyond Wild West Exodus. So Wild West Exodus would be the first and the real focus point for the dystopian age initially. And then once we'd proven that was a sort of a successful place and that there was an interest in exploring that world, there was then four follow-up places we were going to go. The first of them was going to be, we were going to really kind of establish what happened outside of the confines of the Wild West. So that's where Dystopian Wars came in itself, because we can then cover the water and the air in that kind of 1 to 1,200 scale, so like 1 millimeter, 1.5 millimeters tall, so real kind of zoomed out stuff.
Yeah.
And that was just to kind of really establish the aesthetics for these 8 great blocks, these great powers, the big 8 that kind of clash against each other around the world, establish what they look like, and start to kind of flesh out this greater setting. And it's to the benefit of Wild West Exodus. I mean, it really does. It shows how crucial Wild West Exodus is, in that there's so many of the themes and the elements that were introduced in Wild West Exodus kind of echo and resonate across the planet into all these other nooks and crannies. So, you know, we always wanted to make sure that Wild West Exodus was a really important part of it, and by creating these other games, and particularly when we get to the third game, Lost World Exodus, part of that was created through our love of Wild West Exodus, because it would have weakened Wild West Exodus for us to have just started to shoehorn in, you know, the Crown and the Celestial Empire, and it would have made it less and less and less about the Wild West, and that we really don't. The Wild West is the hero of the game, so we didn't want to damage that, and so the best way to do that and still flesh out the rest of the world was to do these other games. So as I say, there was four. I sketched out 4 games that we would need to have in addition to Wild West Exodus to really kind of round out the dystopian age. I mean, it's not a never say never. I'm sure there will be other sort of one-shot things, board games, card games, whatever else we want to kind of drop in there. But I'm talking, there are 5 in total, real pillars that kind of really establish, or they really have an important part of the dystopian age story to tell. And as I say, the first is Wild West Exodus, then Dystopian Wars, and we always knew that Lost World Exodus was going to be one of those. It wasn't always called Lost World Exodus.
Yeah,
I will hasten to add, but the game that became Lost World Exodus was always on the cards as something that we were going to do. There were hidden in plain sight is one of my little favourite phrases, and Lost World Exodus has been hidden in plain sight for 2 years.
Okay.
It's in Lost World Exodus. The location is very, very clearly established in the Wild West Exodus rulebook. In the Enlightened section, it talks about it quite clearly being a place of interest and unique to the dystopian age. The last year's promo miniature, Nakano Gozen, was the emissary of the Blazing Sun. The emissary being someone that goes ahead of, on behalf of something that is coming, some power beyond, which is what she represented. And then finally, our promo mini for this year, which is Yadzia, or Yadia, should I say? She is again she's the first Lost World Exodus miniature, but she's also she represents so many things. She represents her lance is cryo lance, which is cryogenerators, one of the pieces of technology that's introduced in dystopian wars. Her name itself, so she's Polish, so she's the first Polish character. We wanted to do something Polish for several reasons. One, obviously, the Winged Hussar stuff is very cool, but also the Polish community for Wild West Exodus has been really good. So we wanted to make sure that we acknowledged that they had that they had an important role, we felt, in the community. Also, the character herself. She's riding a tread bike, which is a piece of technology from the Dystopian Wars, Dystopian Legions. So it's a classic bit of kit from previous editions of those games. So we wanted to make sure that we were acknowledging that we're not going to lift stuff, but we will be inspired by, we will reimagine things that have been introduced previously and make sure they have a home. So we were doing that. And finally, the character herself. So she is her great-great-grandfather. I'm not even going to pronounce her surname because I'll probably horribly mutilate it. There's a reason why she has that name. If you actually do a Google search, you will find that her great-great-great-grandfather was somebody historical, was somebody important in America. Okay. In fact, he was a general during the American War of Independence. Okay. And that is where, so there is a connection to Wild West Exodus still, and we felt that was important.
That's one of the things that I love that you guys at Warcradle Studios do, is that you, like talking to you this past weekend, is how everything is just kind of connected in some way, whether it's history or you have, like a little bit of hints from the other games in your dystopian world, and it really binds everything together, I think, and is a great element in all the games.
Yeah, the bike, Jadzia's bike, was really, reminiscent of how well you honor the material that you guys are adapting or bringing into the game. It looks like the old, but it looks like you've made better choices, not only in just aesthetically, but it also looks like those choices could also make it easier for you guys as producers to then make modifications, like with the weapons mounted in the new bike. Now that should be so much easier for you guys to make modifications, because the original, the weapons were embedded, so you literally had to have a new sculpt to make any weapon options. With this version, you don't have to do that. It's ready.
Don't. You're quite right, Brian. We don't have to do that. It's almost like we can keep producing that body of that bike, put different riders on it, put different weapons on it. Yeah. Yes.
I mean, I'm an outsider. I'm not in your meeting rooms, but I saw that when I saw the reveal. I'm like, not only does this bike just scream, "Hey, this is a Dystopian Legion," so everyone who played Dystopian Legion saw it and was immediately excited because it looks like their bike. I saw it and was like, and look what they could do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. But in fact, so there's a couple of bits there. So yes, there will be more tread bike things. The tread bike is not going to be ubiquitous. So the Union are never going to get tread bikes. They don't use them. They don't need them. They have iron horses. So we felt it was important that there's got to be more in the world, technology-wise. There's got to be more in the world, more personal transport in the world than basically interceptors and iron horses. So the tread bike is important, but because it's not low tech, but it's certainly not high tech like the iron horse. And it's got a kind of a more rugged kind of feel, so it naturally kind of sits and suits certain factions, certain great powers that have that kind of more rugged sensibility. So the Commonwealth very much fits with them, and when it appears in another faction, it will very much fit with them as well. So yes, that's right. There's a couple of things on Yajir that we made sure. And funny enough, I was having a chat with Neil, our studio illustrator, the other day, because he's illustrating this large piece of art at the moment, which has got several winged hussars kind of racing across into the dystopian landscape. And so Yajir's back banner is unique to her. The others have back banners, which are also feathered because that's what you want, but they are different to her. So there will be more, but they will look slightly different to her. She's an officer, she's a senior figure for them, so it's right that she has a very specific look. But then also the other reason for the back banners and things is because when you have other people on the tread bikes, if you don't give them the back banners, immediately they look different to the wing lancers, and so that's the hussars. So that's something that we felt was important. And yes, switching the weapons out from the outside is another shorthand tweak to the silhouette that we'll be able to make.
Cool. All this stuff sounds cool. I know people are getting excited for Lost World and the exclusive model. Now, talking to you a little bit about Lost World, and you mentioned how they kind of intervene with Wild West Exodus. So me and Brian had some questions for you. Hopefully you couldn't answer them. So, Brian, you want to start off with a question for Stuart here about a Lost World?
Right. So with the interconnectability between the two Exodus games, will we see models in Wild West Exodus get a Lost World Exodus card? And on the flip side, will we have Lost World Exodus models that would also get Wild West Exodus cards? Similar to like what we got with the new promo model, we obviously have a new card, and it has a lot of the same things, and it looks like a Wild West Exodus card. So will we see the reverse as the new game comes out?
So Wild West Exodus and Lost World Exodus use the same cards. So there's your first bit.
Okay.
So the cards themselves may undergo a slight stylistic tweak, but not by much.
Okay.
Because effectively what helps you, the thing that you need, because they use the same core rules, as you use the same terms, same traits, same attributes, same skills, same everything. So weapons, qualities, the work. So the bit that is unique, though, is to build a Lost World army or Lost World force, a detachment, or to put something in a detachment. Detachments are led by commanders. Commanders can then have slots in their detachment cards, and they have theme detachments, and they have faction detachments. So all of these terms are going to be very familiar to Exodus players. But what you'll need is you need to have commanders. You can't have bosses. You have to have commanders. So if your card says boss on it, you cannot lead a detachment.
Okay.
Similarly, if your card only says commander on it, you can only lead you can't lead a posse. You can only lead a detachment. I am not saying that we won't include cards that have boss and commander on them.
Okay.
Maybe you either lead a force. Exodus or a force in Wild West Exodus. So, for example, it is not beyond reasonable that Grant will end up with Commander and Boss on his card.
Okay.
Because why wouldn't you send Odysseus Grant out to the Lost World to go and find some stuff? It would be comfortably within his skill set to go and do that. But then there are factions that just don't exist in the Lost World. So Stonewall Jackson, even though Stonewall Jackson is a commander in the strictest of senses, he won't ever have the commander trait because there is no conceivable way that because there are no outlaw detachments. That's not a thing.
Okay.
And why would he travel literally halfway around the planet into the Lost World? So narratively, there's no reason why he would be there. But for the Union and the Enlightened, so Gustav Eiffel, for example, absolutely could see Eiffel ending up with the commander rule or the commander trait, and so on. And so really, specialists and troops again. So you will have noticed. So as I said, we've had this plan for a while. You will notice there are certain models that exist in Wild West Exodus that have in first edition that have never come out in the second edition. We've never touched them. We will do, but we haven't done yet.
Okay.
So people like Tumblety, people like the Tenshin Yushi, and people like the brothers.
The Enlightened twins.
What's their names? And I know because I've just mapped out their box set. They are called, and also because there are three of them, there aren't two of them.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, indeed you did. They are Imperium Enlightened, the brothers Kaufman.
Okay, Kaufman, that's
Schultz,
right.
Dieter and Siegfried.
Okay.
Siegfried's new.
Yeah. So they will be specialists, but they will also be faces.
Okay.
And they will have both of those traits.
Right. So I guess in during the update for the cards that are currently now under feedback,
yes,
we may start seeing some of those.
You will start to see those.
Okay. Okay, and that kind of leads to one of my questions.
In the same way that we started to sneak in some of the faction traits in previous updates, even though they were for factions that didn't exist, but there was no harm in that. If we'd started to add terms like commander and specialist and troop, people would be like, "What is going on?
Yeah,
these words don't mean anything. Why are you just adding things to cards?" But now, along with 1.09, so we have a list of cards that we know will have cross compatibility. I mean, look, the thing is, you can just play from a kind of a casual play or a tournament play. You can play Wild West Exodus and Lost World Exodus against each other. Detachments against posses. That's fine. No problem at all. But what you can't do is narratively. There's just no reason why. I mean, you can come up with some fun stuff. In your local club or whatever. That's fine. But realistically, there is no reason why wholesale the factions between the two games would routinely be interacting with each other. So not really something that I say from a narrative point of view that we would really explore, but we will be, but individuals for sure. So Nakano Gozen absolutely is going to end up with specialist on her card because why wouldn't she?
Yeah.
And in the same way that Yadja has face as well as specialist on her card because again that would be how you would do that. You'll see individuals be able to kind of switch between the two games because narratively, it is entirely possible that they've ventured into the Lost World or they've explored the Badlands, on the frontier. Some characters are really well travelled and have done both.
Okay,
and that's something we want to do.
Well, good because I think it makes sense that you dive into your current Wild West exit and actually do that. Hey, is there a story here behind this character or this boss or this phase where it makes sense that they would be venturing out or be called to do it? Kind of like the reason why Stonewall Jackson wouldn't go, but then why wouldn't the Union look at a certain boss and go, hey, we should call on this guy. He would be uniquely able to lead our expedition. It just would make sense. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Now, Stuart, so like you're mentioning on the new terms and kind of a character having both terms. One of my questions was involving the adventure deck working in both games, like when you're trying to get the glory points. Is there going to be like maybe an update that kind of will address, get glory point for destroying, a certain unit? Yep. Will it combine both? Is I guess what I'm.
We have so there will be an update to the FAQ and the errata, which will say that as far as the adventure deck is concerned, references to bosses also refer to commanders, references to fate specialists. But we already have a reprint of the cards on the way, and the next reprint, it's not content-wise, it's no different, but the next reprint will have those extra terms included in the deck.
Okay.
See, and I was thinking y'all were going to have Lost World have its own deck and like not be called Guts and Glory. It'd be called something else. Because I know Dystopian Wars, they have their own adventure deck and the terms are different.
They are very different games, and the decks work slightly differently in Dystopian. Right. It'd be Guts and Glory because it's adventures, it's exploration, expeditions, Guts and Glory, no problem at all.
Okay.
There's just as much adventure to be found in the Heart of Darkness that is the Lost World as there is in the brutal and unforgiving Frontier. So Guts and Glory all around.
Well, I looked at the thesaurus, and there are other ways to say Guts and Glory with just different words. So I was like brainstorming. I was like, hey, maybe there's a different deck. And
we're going to
say decks are so similar that you can head to head.
We've got more games to do. We've got to save those terms for those other games. Keep your powder dry. We've got more to do. Yeah.
All right, Brian, fire off another one at Stuart.
All right. Okay, so I know after the last few interviews you've had and the big reveals, so there's the new terms that you've used are detachments, which is now the Lost World version of army building is around detachments. The commanders are the leaders of those detachments. They use specialists, which are the heroes, and then troops are in place of like we have hands in Wild West Exodus. So what can you tell us about how those have synergy in contrast to the synergy that we have with the Wild West Exodus posse building?
Easiest way to explain it, I guess, is that the differences in Lost World emphasize the strengths of those forces and factions and units in the Lost World in the sense that they're part of a military organization. So structure, discipline, and reliability are kind of watchwords for things, whereas Wild West Exodus is more slightly more eclectic, the kind of the mix of things that you can have in terms of all the weird and wonderful faces and so on. And it's also individual what would be the best way to describe it? Like individual or individuality, I suppose, because even hands they're not a military organisation, union aside. They're not a military unit. They are effectively a bunch of individuals that are kind of hanging around together. And they're able to do certain things in Wild West Exodus, which you might assume without giving too much away of Lost World games, the rules. But there are things that hands can do and act and so on that is slightly different to how troops work. So it's not just a case of it's the same thing, it's just got a different term. Mm-hmm. They do work differently. Yellow checks, for example, are troops don't take them, but they are, but troops are tasked, whereas hands are not.
Okay.
So because troops will tend to combine fire on a particular target. Well, they also have troops have the ability to combine their fire into a single attack, but that's we'll explain more about how that works another time. But yes, you can group fire on a particular target with troops, which is not something that hands can do. But individually, hands are able to. This hand can shoot at this guy, this hand can go and shoot at that guy, and so on. Troops don't do that. Troops direct their fire against a particular target as a group.
Okay.
So
right,
yeah. And specialists faces, insofar as specialists is kind of similar in the way that they're heroes, or they're not just necessarily heroes. It could be drummer boys, it could be communications guys, it could be medics, it could be all sorts of. They are specialists. They are individuals, but unlike faces, whereas faces will hang around with hands units like nearby, but they are separate. Specialists can actually. They merge with the troop unit, or they can merge with the troop unit. They can be attached to the troop unit and affect the troop unit by being attached to it, which is something that faces cannot do directly.
Okay, interesting. So they can kind of give them some kind of benefit based on whoever the specialist is.
Yeah, they have an attachment bonus, basically.
Okay.
They get, which benefits the troop unit that they are attached to, and only the troop unit that they are attached to. I mean, for medics, it's probably a fairly obvious thing.
Yeah.
So there's not the aura, the kind of the aura buff that some faces provide in Wild West Exodus is not something that they do in Lost World. Lost World, you attach in order to provide that benefit.
Right. So yeah, it's like one of the things you had when you were discussing this topic that I listened to, one of the neat things is the way Wild West Exodus works is around like the cult of personality.
Yes.
And so your hands benefit from the cult of personality of the bosses through largesse and the use of fortune. And then you had mentioned that in Lost World, there is no fortune because they're getting their synergy off of the mechanics of being a structured military, and so they interact in a different way because there is that's why that I guess hands need a yeller check is because the only reason they're there and the only reason they're being affected is because they think their boss is really great. And that only goes so far.
That's exactly it. And the bosses in Exodus have fortune and largesse. So the fortune is a mechanic in Lost World Exodus, but it's much less common than in Wild West Exodus. And commanders do not command through fortune. That is not something that they do. Commanders have an ability called command. And command works in it's an attribute, or it has a value rather than, and it's not spent. It's an attribute that you make a command check with. What command lets you do is command lets you do some of the things that fortune lets you do, nowhere near as many of the things that fortune lets you do. So fortune is a much more powerful ability. But fortune is finite because obviously you spend fortune. You cannot spend command. You just make a command check in order to be able to do something. And if you pass that command check, then it's happened. If you fail the command check, then it doesn't happen. But failing or passing command checks has no influence on the next time that you take a command check. It's a repeatable ability, as it were.
Can it be rerolled?
Can a command check be re-rolled? It could be re-rolled if you had fortune, or if you had some ability that enabled command checks to be re-rolled. For example, if you had a drummer boy, or depending on the faction, if you had there are some specialists that enable command checks to be re-rolled.
Okay,
but it's not common, to be fair.
Okay.
Right. just figured that would be a common question.
Yeah, of course.
in the re-roll game.
All right, so let's see, Brian. We got the creatures. So we got NPC creatures in Lost World, and we were curious how exactly they would work. It's an element that not one player has control of, but it's the game itself that has control of that. And we were curious if you could reveal how that works, maybe.
I'm not going to go into all the details on how that operates, but all I will say is that players of Wild West Exodus already have a hint as to how those things work, because you have the Badlands expansion, Wild West Exodus.
So it's going to be a mechanic that we're familiar with in a way.
Of course.
Right.
Well, it needs to be, because Wild West Exodus and Lost World Exodus are sisters. They're not kind of distant cousins. They are very closely related. The rules and concepts, even though they may be presented in a different way, they might be expressed slightly differently. The rule book is laid out very differently, but the underlying mechanics and how it works are very intuitive in the same way that Exodus is. And if you can play Wild West Exodus, you could play Lost World Exodus probably without reading the rule book. You'd need the cheat sheet or whatever, but you wouldn't necessarily need to read the rule book in order to know how to play the game.
Okay.
You just need a fresher on the detachment building.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So back on that side note, I'll get back to the creatures in a second, but the detachment. So will we see a detachment card to aid in detachment building, similar to we have in the Wild West Exodus with the posse cards?
Yes.
Okay.
And so, like any of the Wild West Exodus models that get commander, they will have their own, or will have a rule that says you use so and so's detachment card.
Yeah, well, so there will be faction detachment cards. So if they have a boss that has the commander rule, one would assume that he is of a faction. Let's be honest, it'll only be the Enlightened and the Union. They will have a faction card already, so they'll know what card to use.
Okay, so you said only Enlightened and Union, but there is a faction in Wild West Exodus that is expressly very closely tied with the Union, and would it not make sense that maybe some of that faction be sent to the Lost World? Especially, there's a certain posse in that faction that is, their whole function is to investigate the weirdness of the world. That maybe should be the only exception.
Oh boy, here we go.
So the rule of law is largely irrelevant in the Lost World. Who are you trying to maintain law with? I get what you're saying, Brian. At the moment, I can't see. So, for example, I could see Jedrick Powell, for example. I could see in his backstory that perhaps he might have been there, or maybe not been there, but certainly he may have a previous Union career or something like that, maybe. But I can't see
them calling them to
yeah. And we've got so much great stuff to do with the Lawmen coming up. I think they're going to have their hands pretty full with what's coming down the line for Wild West Exodus. Because don't forget, Lost World Exodus is super cool. There's loads of stuff coming out for Lost World, but Wild West Exodus is about to go into its biggest year yet.
Yeah.
And,
that's that question's in the next segment.
Okay.
So we'll wrap up our little bit of questions we had with Lost World, because you guys got a lot of stuff that you're going to be sprinkling out over the next year. Do you guys got like kind of a target date when you guys are going to maybe be releasing it? I know you guys have stated that you wanted to get Dystopian Wars out to all of us, and then you can concentrate on that one. End of the year, maybe?
No, we'll be... Sorry. No, that's not quite right. We're developing Lost World Exodus already now. It's already in development. it's not a case of, we don't work on things serially. We don't do so. We're going to do everything on Dystopian Wars. Then when that's finished, then we'll make a start on. You can't, otherwise it'll take if a game 2-year development cycle. Then you release a game every 2 years, and that's no good. So we have lots of things happening in parallel. We've got about 6-7 games in development at the moment. Only 3 of them are in the dystopian age, but we've got lots of things being worked on in the studio by different teams, different people. But in terms of release schedule, though, yeah, absolutely. We're going to release the dystopian Wars. Once that's released, once that's had its moment of being the new cool game, then we will then announce a release date for Lost World Exodus. So you could imagine, none of this is hard, but as a kind of a general terms, if you had kind of late autumn dystopian wars around that kind of time, then you could imagine that a kind of a Christmas time you might see, November, December time you might see Lost World. Certainly, the aim is dystopian wars sometime after the summer, and then Lost World in the winter. Okay.
So fairly soon. I mean, that's fairly soon for everybody. All right. I think that about does it, Stuart. I think we can let you go unless you had anything else. Brian, did you have anything else to ask Stuart while we got him on the line?
No, I mean, he covered everything. I can just come up with more questions, but I don't want to keep them too long.
Yeah, I mean, you had a long weekend, Stuart, so we wanted to try and keep this short. And it was a very good weekend, I think, overall. And but we wanted to thank you for jumping on since you were over on this side of the world with us. And we, figure it's a good opportunity to get you on in kind of our time zone, as somebody's not. And we appreciate you coming on and talking a little bit about your big announcement at AdeptiCon with Lost World.
Oh, no, it's no problem at all. It makes us doing what we do easier, or we can do things more confidently, knowing that it's obviously striking a chord with people, that hobbyists have got an interest in what we're doing, and it's gratifying, because there's no reason why we should expect that kind of stuff. But obviously there is something about it that appeals, and not only that, particularly for people that have been with Wild West Exodus for many years, prior to us taking over it. Obviously, we've taken things in a different direction, but it's still obviously something that's speaking to people, and that
it excites them. I saw a lot of excitement this weekend.
Yeah, that's gratifying as well.
All right, we will go ahead and get out of here, Stuart, and let you go and get ready to make your trip back to the UK tomorrow. And like I said, we appreciate you being on, and thanks again.
No trouble. Pleasure as always, chaps. I'll no doubt speak to you again in the future.
Okay, we will talk to you later, Stuart. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Hey, y'all. This is Eric in the Blackhoof Saloon editing parlor. I just wanted to give you guys a little side note that in our talk here with Stuart just after Adepticon about Lost World Exodus, me and Brian both got into Wild West Exodus a little bit with Stuart, and we decided to edit the Wild West Exodus stuff out of this little segment that we're going to post up in the Ramblin part of our show and save it for the main show. So if you guys want to catch those questions with Stuart, you can find those in our next episode that's coming out for the Blackhoof Saloon Wild West Exodus podcast, and that's going to be episode 12. Later this month is when we're going to drop that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little sit-down talk we had with Stuart just after their big announcement at AdeptiCon of Lost World Exodus. And as always, feel free to send us an email at our Gmail account, and feel free to look us up on Twitter and Instagram and even on YouTube. So this is Eric for both Tom and Brian saying, take it easy.
Thanks for warming a seat at our table and listening to the Chit-Chat on Blackhoof Saloon-Ramblin. Feel free to get a hold of us with comments or questions on the interwebs and shoot us a telegraph at blackhoofsaloon@gmail.com or find us on the Facebook at Blackhoof WWX Podcast. Music provided for use by Ross Bugden and can be found at one of his YouTube channels, Ross Bugden Music or Ross Bugden Composer. Until next time, y'all, ramble on.